So now you're at the point where you've come out to your wife. She's been supportive, Julie and Jared. Now you're trying to think about how to talk about your uncle, who's a bishop, to LDS Church leaders.
Right.
So what did you do?
Yeah. Well, we knew we had to do something. We knew that it wasn't right that he was in a position to be a bishop and to have the ability to have children. You know, we didn't know if he had abused other people. We didn't know anything about anything, but we knew that we had to tell somebody. And so in December of 2017, we met with our bishop. It doubled as a tithing settlement meeting as well. And
This is less than a year ago, which means you sat on this at least a year after talking to Julie.
It was a year and a couple months. And
it wasn't something you rushed into.
No.
Right.
During that time, I mean, we got home, he told me, I'm scouring the internet. Kind of, he's ahead of me, so I'm scouring the internet. Of course it's taken care of. You know, in the 80s, someone just brushed it under the table. But, you know, I go to the handbooks. I go to the podcasts. How is it dealt with? That kind of thing. Well, of course, God would intervene because bishops' names go up to the 12, you know, is what we're told.
Yeah,
and,
the first
hey,
presidency
maybe
approves
not
bishops,
this
right?
one. Maybe just not this one. Don't know why, but if there's a time for revelation, it's right there. I mean, I was a primary president. I know that who could be a teacher? Maybe that one. Yeah, that sounds good. You know, that works in primary. But a bishop, that's important. So that deconstructs.
As if primary teachers aren't important, right?
No, they are.
Because they're no, I know you're not saying that, but like we have that mentality.
Yes.
It's just a primary teacher, but they're the ones who can be alone with kids, right?
Right.
True.
Yeah.
They're
True,
the ones
true.
who, you know, mold the minds of our children. So.
Yes.
In some way, they're even more important. But anyway,
For sure,
keep going.
yeah. But anyway, so we're going through, at that point, kind of the normal faith crisis of questioning, how does this work? How does this... And so, you know, a year and a few months later, it's December, it's tithing settlement. We've got other issues at that point, too, because our deconstruction of faith has started with this event, and now it's spread. Yeah. But we're still in. I mean, we baptized our son that year. That was a decision that a lot of, you know, we're still in. We're still making this work. We're trying to figure out how to nuance it, but we're still here. But the Sam Young petition had come up. We both signed it. You know, we start thinking, he's meeting alone with people.
It's just not good.
This is not a good situation.
Somebody needs to know. We knew that we had a duty to make someone aware that you may have a problem here, and somebody needs to know.
And that's kudos to Sam Young and the Protect LDS Children movement, everyone who supported him, because that has enabled a lot of victims to. Yeah. It's given them the courage and the interest and the willingness to speak out. So kudos to them. And you know, for those who are just dropping in and don't know anything about Sam Young, he was just excommunicated a couple weeks ago, literally as a former bishop, only for fighting to protect children from abuse.
Right, exactly. Which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And that's, in my mind, I was saying, not only do we have bishops that are asking inappropriate questions, but you may have bishops that are dangerous in addition to just, these aren't all just good men asking inappropriate questions because they may feel they have to ask these inappropriate questions. You've got a system in place that's allowing some bishops to get in there that shouldn't be there. And that's why I felt that it was important to let someone know. So, and
because oftentimes abusers repeat the abuse.
Correct. And we didn't know.
When you're at the level of having a 6 or 7 year old child perform oral sex on you, that's a level of severity
that's
way
outside the normal
and the
range.
Probability that there have been other victims is likely high.
Correct.
So you have good reason to
we'd been researching these things
and we knew that, so we felt we had to let somebody know. And I was at the point where I wasn't going to pay any more tithing to an organization that I felt I had been, had been dishonest to me. So we went into tithing settlement, and I pay my tithing once a year. I've always done it. I go into tithing settlement, write a check for the year, and our bishop, says it shows you've paid 0 tithing for the year. How would you like to declare your tithing settlement? I says, I'm not going to pay tithing this year. And I says, I've got problems with the church. I don't agree with some of the things that were being taught. And the bishop looked at us like a deer in the headlights because we are very, like
primary president, elders quorum secretary, sitting here.
My dad's a high councilman. He'd been our bishop for 5 years. We're good friends. And he's like, where did this come from?
He was blindsided.
And this is in like not rural, farmland, rural. Idaho, where everyone grew up together, ward. Everyone knew each other, right? Everyone went to high school together.
I cut our bishop's hay for him.
I'm good friends with his wife.
You can just see in his mind that he's like, what is going on? Like what's going on? And
again, this is the Preston Franklin kind of outside of Preston.
It's actually
Franklin.
Mink Creek.
Yeah, it's north of Preston.
Mink Creek.
You call it Crick?
It's a creek.
If you're from there, you call it Mink Creek. If you're not, you call it Mink Creek.
Right. Okay.
So, anyways, that comes up, and he's trying to process what's going on. And Juli just says, something happened to Jared when he was a young child, and we need to tell you that. And so we told him. We told him what had happened, and
that's the first time you told a Mormon leader.
Yes. That's the first time I told the Mormon leader.
The first time he told anyone besides me.
Okay, that was number 2.
And we didn't get explicit. We said we didn't, he was abused.
I just said I was abused by, he knows my uncle. I said I was abused by my uncle, and he's now a bishop. And I says over the last few years, I can't reconcile that in my mind. And
so in that moment, he knows who it is.
Yes.
It's his friend, and it's someone.
They're not close friends, but he knows who he is.
Knows who he is, and knew that he was a sitting bishop.
Correct.
Yes.
So, okay, notice has been served.
Yeah, and so he knows in December of 2017, and he was very kind. He said he was sorry, and he didn't know what to say. And we were sitting there thinking, what's he going to say? And he didn't know what to say. But he did ask us for our temple recommends because we didn't pay tithing. So we didn't have them with us. So we said, well, we don't got them with us. And he says, well, don't go to the temple then. So we were told in that meeting not to attend the temple because we did not pay our tithing.
And this is in a conversation of, well, what are your thoughts on the temple? What are your thoughts on the Book of Mormon? Dealing with our faith crisis.
Yeah. Okay, so after you've confessed that or reported abuse by a sitting bishop, it turns into an inquisition on your faith and your worthiness.
And he was trying to figure out how he could
your
help
worthiness.
us with that.
Correct.
But yes.
We were told we were not worthy to go to the temple.
And you made a point to mention to me that this is a good man. This
very
is
good man.
Someone you love and respect.
I still respect the man.
But it's sometimes the systems that make good people do.
He's a dentist. He doesn't know. He's not trained. He's not trained in. Somebody walks through your door and says, 35 years ago I was sexually abused as a child. He has no tools to deal with that. I thought that they did. I thought that there would be, and he says, I'm going to have to talk to President Keller about this, who's our stake president, who's also a good family friend. And he says, I'll get back with you.
But still, so that's the compassion part of me and you. The anger part of me is saying, how in the world, when you're reporting a very serious childhood sexual abuse, does it turn in not only to a worthiness inquisition on instead of like, oh my gosh, how do I find you support? How do I find you a therapist? Let's get to the bottom of this. Let's talk to this bishop. Let's get him in here. It turns into a worthiness interview where you're told, let me have your temple recommends. You can't go to the temple anymore.
Correct.
That is
correct.
What was that like? How did you feel?
I was smart enough to know that he is a very by the book man. And I kind of knew that when I didn't pay tithing that would probably, I didn't think it would happen that meeting, but I was pretty sure that it was going to happen. But I was very surprised that I just told him something that is very serious, and it didn't seem like it was very serious. He was concerned about it and said he was going to talk to the stake president about it. And he did ask me, what do you want to be done with this? And I said, I don't know. I'm just telling you. I'm telling you guys that you have a problem with a bishop that shouldn't be a bishop. I don't know what you want to do. Like it's not what I want done with it. It's like we have an obligation to let you know you got a problem here. I don't know.
But you were surprised that what?
The conversation was more concerned about our faith in the church. So
what was it like for you, Julie?
Same, that he did express empathy, and I'm so sorry that happened to you, but there was no...
I've never to this day, 9 months later, been asked if there's any help that I need or been offered any
counseling or any
by anybody from
Jared
the church.
probably wouldn't have taken him up on that, but nothing was offered. No skills, no, hey, this works well for other people of abuse. Nothing about the abuse was ever offered besides, I'm so sorry that happened to you.
They apologized that the abuse had happened.
And we feel really bad that happened to you.
Yeah.
Now, how can we get you back believing the way you're supposed to be believing?
That's been, so we met with him that night.
How did it end?
He hugged us and told us he loved us, and he didn't want to take our temple recommends. It was more kind of like we were discussing our faith, and we'd recently been to the temple, and he was kind of asking us, and then he was like, oh, well, do you have your recommends with you? And we said no, and he's like, well, since you're not paying tithing, probably don't go. Yeah. And we were both kind of like, okay.
And you might think,
I mean,
if there were ever a time a spiritual leader would want you going to the temple,
that would be it.
Go sit in the temple as a couple and think about these things,
Yeah. But I knew that you had to pay your tithing to have a temple recommend, so I kind of figured that that's where they'd go if they were going to follow the rules. So it ended by him saying, I got to talk to President Keller. We'll see what we need to do about this. If I can.
He asked our permission.
He asked if he could talk to President Keller, and I said, that's why we're here. Yeah, you need to talk to him. So we got a call from the stake president.
Okay, wait, what was it like driving home? What were you thinking and feeling?
We didn't drive home. We drove to his parents' house.
Yeah, we drove straight to my parents' house.
Because his dad's on the high council. We are no longer temple holding members. Temple recommend holding members of our ward.
We didn't want
He's going to find out.
We didn't want him to find out through
anyone else.
Stake president.
So what'd you do?
We stopped in and
chatted for a minute.
Chatted and then told them.
What was that like? That's like double stress or trauma in one night.
It was good because my parents have been great to us through this whole process as well as we could expect, especially with the abuse aspect. Maybe not so much about faith issues, but they didn't know. They had no idea that the abuse had occurred, and you could see my dad was angry. That I think he said a couple times, had I known, I would have lynched him.
So he believed you?
My parents did believe me. I still believe that they do believe me. They've said a few things every now and then that make me question whether they believe me, but I think in their mind that's their active Mormon coming out saying,
"How can I believe?
I believe both?"
It's trying to manage their cognitive dissonance.
Correct.
But overall, your general impression was that they believed you and were upset.
Well, and we walked into that thinking, because Jared had that memory in the card, that
I thought maybe they knew.
And that was one thing that had been hard for us over the years was, if I knew that somebody did that to my kid, no one had ever talked to Jared. Nothing had ever been said. So we go in and he started the conversation with, I remember what Lynn did to me. And his parents both kind of blank face. And he's like, I remember saying this to you in the car. And they both said, we don't remember that.
Yeah, that's the thing as a parent. Like I've had a kid experience some really traumatic things, and it's just you want to believe anything but that happened.
Yeah. And his mom's reaction was, I don't remember you telling me that, but I remember your sister when she was very young coming to me and saying this uncle had asked her to pull her pants down. I mean, it's the 80s. His mom had just said, oh, well, you just don't be alone with him anymore. We're not going to. And her sister was in the room. Yeah. And since that aunt came and said, well, she must have been telling the truth. But they both have that memory.
So there's
but
at least one
ever said
one other family member that experienced abuse too.
She doesn't recall anything like that happening at this point. So,
but the mom does.
But my mom remembers her, and my aunt remember her coming to them and saying that. So as a child, so it went good. We told them what was going on. I did tell them, this has caused me to lose a lot of faith in the church. I didn't tell them that I didn't believe at that time, but I told them we didn't pay tithing, and we're questioning whether this is a good place.
And we're still trying to make it work. I mean, we live in Mormondom. Our kids, it's everything. So we're trying to make this work, and even if we have to be nuanced.
I still believed it was a good place for our kids, even though it may turn into a very difficult place for us. So that's what we...
So your motives aren't to take down the church?
No.
Yeah.
In fact, we continued to go to church.
I was still primary president,
you're still
going to PPIs,
Yeah.
teaching primary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So anything else about telling your parents or?
No.
Okay. So then what happened next?
Stake president called us. We met with him. He was very concerned and wanted to get our side of the story. So we went in, told him the story. He says, he knew my uncle's stake president because it's in the same area. So he says, I know his stake president, President Ballard. I'm going to get in contact with him and we'll work this out.
Any idea if it's related to?
I don't know if it's related to him.
I'm Russell Ballard.
I don't know.
Apostle.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I've thought that, but I don't know.
Okay.
And again, the stake president asked us, what do you want done?
Yeah.
And we're like,
I don't know. Like, it's up to you. Like, we're telling you this because we think that you need to act upon this.
And we care about his uncle's family.
And that's a burden that's a burden that shouldn't be put on victims, right?
That's the way I feel now.
The church should have a protocol. It's like call, get you therapy, get you support, release the effing bishop, right?
Right.
And call the police, notify the authorities.
So
right? And
do something.
Do something, not ask you what you want to be done. That feels to me like a very lawyerly step.
I feel like
right?
they were trying to be respectful.
But they didn't know what to do.
But they didn't know what to do. And then it puts it back on you. Like, well, so I have to tell you what to do?
Yeah.
You don't want to be responsible for wrecking someone's life.
No.
And that burden was on me. Like, I didn't want to be the one that caused all that negative things to happen in his life. So he took that information and was going to get with President Ballard and figure out what needed to be done, basically. And so we had met, the timeline, we met with our bishop again a time or two about our faith crisis.
And he actually offered, he felt really bad that he'd taken our temple recommends. He said, let's get you on a payment plan for tithing. And you can nuance some of these questions. Yeah. Do you believe in do you feel good when you read the Book of Mormon? That means you believe it. Do you feel good in the temple? That means he's trying to help us walk us through temple recommend questions. And we're like...
I says, no.
But not nuance the tithing.
Not nuance the tithing. Get on the plan.
It's a payment plan. And I declined. I says, you know what? I know what the rules are. I know how you want those questions answered.
And I'm
not going to lie about it. So...
that felt dishonest to you.
Felt dishonest to me. So I'm like, I'm not going to pay tithing. I'm not going to lie about those questions. So I guess I'm not worthy of a temple recommend. So we have not had temple recommend since then.
Okay.
So we had a number of conversations with our bishop and stake president over the faith crisis issue.
Nothing more was said about the abuse.
Nothing more was said about the abuse.
Nothing more was said about the abuse.
Let me get the timeline now. I believe about 3 weeks. So I didn't hear anything else other than we'd met with our bishop about our faith crisis stuff until finally on February 12th. So
a few months later.
Yeah, a few months later, I'm like, what? I haven't heard anything. What's going on? So I texted my stake president and said, what's going on? And he texted me back, and I have all the texts that I've saved. He said, I haven't heard anything. Let me get in contact with President Ballard and see what he's done. So he got in contact with President Ballard, and we set up a meeting and met with our stake president again on the 15th, but President Ballard had not brought it up with my uncle at that point. So he was made aware of the accusation, but had spent over a month trying to determine what course of action to take, had not contacted my uncle or brought it up with my uncle. And my stake president hadn't brought it up with anybody. And so I says, well, were we just going to do nothing? Like, something's got to be done. And my stake president said, well, we don't know how to approach this. We don't know the best way to approach this. And so in that meeting on the 15th of February, somehow along the line, the plan got concocted that maybe I should go talk to my uncle about this.
Well, I think Jared said...
And I may have brought it up because we started to brainstorm on, is it your responsibility, my stake president's responsibility to go talk to my uncle?
This is like the Keystone Cops. It's like...
Yeah, like I shouldn't be there as a victim. Like, why should I be there trying to figure out how they're going to confront my uncle? Like, that shouldn't have been my responsibility, but there I was. And at the end of that meeting, the plan came up that maybe the best thing would be for me to contact my uncle and confront him about the abuse. They wanted to pray about it for a couple of days. So the 2 stake presidents prayed about it and thought about it for a couple of days, and both agreed that if I was comfortable, that would be a good idea. So I decided, well, I guess I'm going to contact my uncle, who I haven't talked to for a number of years. I've seen him in passing at some weddings and stuff, but
and I'm freaking out.
I guess I'm going to go contact my uncle. So in my mind, I'm trying to do this in a way that his wife won't find out, or, I didn't know. I wanted to do this as discreetly and quietly as possible, out of respect for him, and let him be the one that tells people. So I actually just texted him, and I said, hey, Lynn, it's Jared. I need to visit with you about something. And that was like at 8 in the morning on a Saturday. And he didn't get back with me.
I reached out to Natasha because I'd been listening to her podcasts, and I'm freaking out because
I'm going to go talk
he's
to my
going
uncle.
to confront his abuser. He's told me and some others, I am like, what should he say? What should he do? I want to go with him. He doesn't want me to go with him. He wants to do it by himself. So I get in contact with her through Facebook Messenger and her secretary, and she's giving me some ideas. She writes this rough blog post about, maybe do this, maybe be prepared for it not to go well. And I'm like, oh no, it's not going to go well, and that he's going to take it really hard. But so go ahead.
Yeah,
again.
so I texted him on a Saturday morning, and I don't hear back from him all day long. I'm thinking, oh, he's blowing me off. And at 5 o'clock that afternoon, he finally texted me back and said he'd been in the temple all day at a wedding, and he was busy, and he had just got my text. He'd be more than willing to meet with me anytime. And I said, how about in an hour? Because I'm like, I got to just get this done. It's like ripping a Band-Aid off. I'm not going to set up an appointment for days, and I'm on my way down there. How about we meet in your bishop's office in an hour? And he said, great. So we let my stake president and his stake president know that I was meeting with him that night. So we met with him, I think at 7 is when we met with him. And so I met with them, and honestly, the experience that I have of that meeting was, it was almost it was an experience that was almost like out of body. It was so hard for me to do that I just did it. And I didn't feel like I was there. It was
You're almost dissociated because of the stress of confronting your abuser.
It was a stress level that I've dealt with high stress levels in my life and my job and stuff, and it was hard to do. But I knew I had to do it, so I did it. And we chit-chatted for a couple minutes, and I wish I would have recorded that conversation, but I didn't. And I think the way I brought it up was, I said, I remember what happened between you and I when I was a child, and I'm here to talk about that. And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. And I said, I have vivid memories of sexual abuse as a child between me and you. And I've never forgotten those, and it's an issue for me now in my life. It's caused me to question my faith. I don't believe that you've taken care of those things, and I believe it's a problem that needs to be resolved. And I've told my stake president, and your stake president is aware of it. I just wanted to let you know. And he denied that he remembered anything. I think his response was, we spent a lot of time together when we were kids, was his response. He wasn't surprised in any way, or never said sorry, nothing. He in my mind, he was ready for me or somebody else to confront him with abuse. And I didn't know what to say at that point, because, what else do you say? I didn't know what to say other than, well, I have those memories and I don't know what to do now. And so it ended very awkwardly, and I left.
So either he lied or has blocked it out of his own memory.
Correct. So
from your perspective.
From my perspective, yeah. And so I went out.
Did you think about going with him, Julie?
I wanted to go with him. I was in the car.
She was in the car outside.
I wanted to go with him.
Okay.
Yeah.
He said that there was no, I try and think of how I would respond if someone accused me of those things, and I would have been shocked. How could you say that? Why would you think that? What are you talking about? Jared said there was none of that, that it was just a very cold, I don't remember that.
We spent a lot
of time together, but I don't remember that.
That's kind of weird.
Yeah. And he never reached out. He's never reached out to me since that day.
Not once?
Not once. He never reached out to my parents.
What?
His older brother. He never called my dad and said, oh my goodness, like this just happened. Until like 3 weeks ago, my parents finally made the effort to get in contact with him, but he never reached out to any of us at all.
That's
nor
weird.
His wife.
That's super weird.
Yeah.
And his wife, they would usually come at Memorial Day to visit graves, things like that. Yeah. We didn't see him.
They've avoided.
We didn't know if she knew or anything.
Yeah. So that happened. I go out to the car where Juli is, and I'm like, he doesn't remember. It says he doesn't remember it happening.
Does that make you second guess yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Because now I'm like, maybe it didn't happen. Like I immediately started to second guess myself, but I knew that was not I know what happened. It's not a memory that I'm making up. And so I only second guessed myself for a few seconds. And then I quickly realized that this is a bigger mess now than I ever thought it would be. And so I wanted to meet with his stake president to give his stake president just my side of the story so he knew. And he wouldn't answer our call. His voicemail box was full, so you couldn't leave a message. I could text him, but he wouldn't respond back. I called my stake president and said, I would really like to meet with President Ballard tonight. Like, I'm down here. Can I go meet him anywhere?
And they both knew that meeting was happening.
And he said, let me try to get a hold of him. He actually got a hold of him, and he told my stake president that he was a little bit busy that evening and it may not work out. And I'm thinking, in my mind, I'm sitting there, totally in a mental mess now, thinking if I was a stake president and I had somebody that was accusing a bishop that I had of sexual abuse, I think that would very quickly rise to the top of my priority list. Like, I would want to go visit with this victim to get their side of the story. It may not work out. I'm a little busy tonight. We waited around for 3 hours down there to see if he would meet with us. Texting him, calling my stake president, saying, we're here. We went to Wendy's and sat at Wendy's for like an hour and a half so we could wait to meet with him, and he wouldn't meet with us that night.
And it's something that's hard is it's got to be a conflict of interest to have to report to a stake president who called this man as bishop, because it's going to be immediately questioning their own inspiration because they're the ones that made the call.
Right, and that's why I wanted to meet with him to say, I get that you're in a tough position now, President Ballard, but hear my side of the story because this is my side of the story.
And they are actually close friends.
Yeah, they're my uncle and that stake president are very good friends.
So you're the abuser, your uncle the abuser, and the stake president Ballard are close friends.
Yes.
Correct.
So that adds another layer of conflict of interest.
And I totally understand that it's a he said thing at this point, that it's an alleged, I'm alleging this. It's many years ago. I totally get that. And I understand the position that Elder Ballard was in with, he's the one who called him. And how do you figure that out? So I figured, okay, well, he's not going to meet with us tonight.
The only thing I'll say is that whether or not it actually happened, the seriousness of the allegation,
Right.
Exactly,
to me, because of the risk of other people being hurt, makes it so action needs to be taken regardless of whether it actually happened.
exactly.
And that's what I tell people. I don't expect anybody to believe me or to believe my uncle or to not believe me or to not believe my uncle. That's not the issue here now. The issue now here is there's an accusation there that's serious, and
from a credible person.
What are we going to do about it? I feel I'm credible.
Yeah.
We used to be
I don't have
credible.
anything to win from this. Like, I have everything to lose from coming forward here. Like, it would be way easier for me to have just zipped my lips and kept it quiet. So I'm gaining nothing. So I tried to meet with him for another 3 weeks. He couldn't leave a voicemail ever. It was full. I would text him. He wouldn't text me back. And then he called me a couple times. The first time I actually got a hold of him, he says, well, I do interviews on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Tuesday's full, but I can meet you on Thursday. I was out of town that Thursday for work. So I'm like, I can't do that, but I'm driving to work on Monday. Can I stop by somewhere Monday and just visit with you? And he says, I only do interviews Tuesdays and Thursdays. He gave me that option. And so I tried for 3 weeks to meet with him. Finally, after 3 weeks, I realized this guy doesn't want to meet with me, and I was mad. And so I finally just texted him back and said, look, it's obvious that you don't want to meet with me. If you need any information from me, you can get it through my stake president, because he clearly was making no effort to meet with me at all. So he's never, other than a few brief phone conversations with me, never met. I've never met with his stake president. So I told, I met with my uncle, and that happened on February the 12th.
March 3rd.
Oh, March 3rd, yeah. So March 3rd, I met.
Of this year.
Of this year on March 3rd. And my stake president actually contacted the area authority, who was Elder Stephen Lang at the time. He's been released.
Spell that.
Laing.
Okay.
He's now the temple president at Brigham City. He's released, replaced by Elder Christensen, I believe, who's now an area authority, or the area president, went from an area authority to an area president. So there's been a change in general authorities over the area. But my stake president contacted Elder Lang. And up to this point, I had not shared vivid details of the abuse with anybody other than my wife and my parents. I hadn't told them what the abuse was. And my stake president, we met with him again, and he said that he had contacted Elder Lang, and Elder Lang's response was, sometimes things happen in our youth and our memories are faint. We need to trust in the atonement and move on.
Read that again.
Sometimes things happen in our youth and our memories are faint. We need to trust in the atonement and move on. That was what I was told the general authority over our area had said when he was told about my allegations. And
how'd that make you feel?
Awful.
Why?
I thought that we were doing the right thing and that this was something that was going to be taken care of. And obviously I was being told, the way I took that was that I need to trust in the atonement. Like, what? The atonement's for forgiveness. Like, why do I need to trust in the atonement? Like, I'm doing what's right here, and I'm stepping out of my comfort zone to make sure that right decisions are made. And this area authority is telling me, basically, he doesn't believe me, is the way I took that.
And it's a selective reading of the atonement, because we're all taught part of the atonement is you have to make restitution.
Yeah.
So it's saying focus on the forgiveness part, but we're going to ignore the restitution part.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So,
and how did that make you feel, Julie, when you heard the general authority give that response?
Things happen in our youth, not those kinds of things. I thought, he doesn't understand. He doesn't understand the severity of this. In my mind, I thought I gave him a little bit of leeway in thinking he doesn't get how serious this is.
And that was valid.
But it was very dismissive.
Yeah, and you're
upsetting.
Expecting more, you're kind of, I'm imagining, expecting more awareness, more sensitivity, a better approach to handling the higher up you go in the chain.
Yes.
Right.
And I'm guessing that's not.
No, it didn't feel that. It felt like we were being dismissed more so by them.
Which can be even more painful.
Yeah.
Yes.
You expect better responses the
And
more you go up the chain.
Answers.
At this point, something needs to be done. I'm like, this is almost 4 months, like 3.5 months. Like, what are you doing? You need to do something. And not going back to, you don't have to believe Jared, you don't have to believe his uncle, but something needs to be done.
Yeah. So nothing was done for another month. So I think it's April 3rd is the next day that comes up. Finally, like April 3rd. I texted my stake president again on April the 3rd. And his text back to me was he thought that I was handling it with my uncle's stake president. So he thought for the whole month we were working with my uncle's stake president on how to handle this issue.
So clearly there's no communication between stake presidents, which is ridiculous.
And it's out of his stake, so he does have no authority. We've learned that he was told, this is not your stake. You need to be concerned with the faith crisis. We'll deal with the abuse down in this stake.
But the other stake president's stonewalling, so.
Yeah, He hasn't done anything. So he calls, he says, I'll check into this. So he calls me back a little bit later and said, I talked to President Ballard, and he said he had visited with Lynn and the issue had come up. So they had visited.
Not that he called him in to visit about that
Yeah.
issue, but in a visit that they had, it did come up.
So my stake president, I was mad. Again, I'm like, something's got to happen here. So and in the meantime, between me meeting with my uncle by myself and this month now, the whole McKenna Denson thing came out. Her name wasn't out yet, but the whole Joseph Bishop thing broken the news. And so the church was scrambling to handle these things a little bit differently, I believe.
Yeah.
And
I just have to throw this in, that for as poorly as you were treated, my guess is that you were treated 5 times better than a woman would be treated in the same situation, because you have the priesthood, you're an upstanding member of the community, you generate the revenue, and as awful as you've been treated, and we'll be interviewing women about their experiences, my guess is the experience of a female is actually multiple times worse.
I agree.
Than what you're experiencing.
Correct.
And I just want to, it's a shout out to women and an acknowledgement that as poorly as you were treated, you were a person of privilege and power, and look how poorly you were treated. Think about how people without privilege or power
Correct.
and without priesthood are treated. So
I agree.
Anyway.
I agree.
And
100%.
that's actually when President Ballard kind of was, after forever, was like, well, I guess I can meet with you. He actually said, I've heard you're a pretty good, like, he said something about that he heard that he was a pretty good individual. Like,
I think he wrote me off at first because he thought I was. Yeah.
But he was like, oh, he actually has some credibility. I guess I could meet with you.
Yeah. So anyways, my stake president at that point calls Salt Lake again. He'd called the 800 number right off the bat and didn't get any information there other than the statute of limitations, I think, was expired or something.
Because that 1-800 number isn't there to protect victims.
Right.
It's Curtin McConkie trying to look at the law and advise the church not about how to help the victims, but how to protect itself against lawsuits.
Right.
Which is why statute of limitations comes up.
Right.
Which is mind-boggling that number is not primarily to provide aid and comfort. And to this date, you haven't received therapy paid for by the church for the abuse.
No one's even asked if I would
do that.
I probably wouldn't take any therapy from the church.
But no one's even asked, which is outrageous. Okay.
Right. So we were on vacation in California, and my stake president actually called me and said he had called Salt Lake again to bring the issue up again, and that he was informed that the inside legal counsel had referred this to the outside legal counsel, and that they were very aware of it, and that we may or may not hear from the outside counsel, which we've never heard from any lawyers from the church at all. But that's what, and he said that in a way that's like, this is a good thing. Like, the attorneys are now aware of it. So that's what we were told then. We never heard from those guys. But in that conversation, he said, Elder Lang, the area authority, would be willing to meet with you if you feel like you would like to meet with him. And so we said, absolutely, we would like to meet with him. I've got a few questions for him. I want to, hear his take on how we should handle this. So we met with Elder Lang on April the 25th. He drove up and met with us in our bishop's office. So
when we heard that Elder Lang said that those are things we do in our youth, we kind of paused. I reached out to Natasha again, and I said, I just want to clarify. This is the age difference, 12-year age span. Here's what transpired. Are these things that happen in our youth? So she actually, we're on this vacation in California, got my message, said she was meeting with some colleagues. They were going to discuss our situation. During that discussion, she realized she felt like she was a mandatory reporter. So we were notified she was going to be reporting it to CPS.
Yeah. So on that vacation, we were told Natasha's going to report this, and the church attorneys were made aware of it, and that we could meet with Elder Lang when we got home. So we did. We met with Elder Lang on April 25th. It was 3 hours. We visited with him, and my stake president and my bishop were there. And for 3 hours, we visited with that. We have that recorded. And we went through our faith crisis issues, but mostly focused on how this was being handled, how the abuse was being handled. He apologized again that the abuse had occurred, said he was very sorry that it had happened.
You felt believed by the general authority, by Elder Lang?
No.
But he apologized.
He apologized and said he was sorry that I had experienced this. But then told me that the way that the church operates is that we only do things in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. And since I was only one witness, that there was really nothing that could be done. And he tried to get me to understand my uncle's side of the story. He's like, you got to understand the other side of the story, that it's an accusation that's only backed up by one person, and we can't do anything unless it's in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. And I was not very nice to him in a couple of a couple of times in that meeting because I was frustrated at saying that's ridiculous. There's never multiple witnesses that all come forward at the same time. Like, of course, there's only one witness here. But that doesn't mean you do nothing.
That basically says that if you want to abuse children, make sure you're alone with the child.
Which is always the case. Yeah.
And we may or may not, you may or may not decide to release that recording. It's something we've talked about,
Correct.
but ultimately that's going to be up to you.
Right.
But listeners, look for the possibility that we release some or all of that recording. But if you guys decide not to, that's
Right.
totally fine as well. But I just want to insert that so that people are aware to think about that. Anyway, so he says no 2 or 3 witnesses.
Yeah.
Well, and I called him out on it, and I said, what about if this was a business? What if this was a business and this came through an HR department that an employee was accused in the past of, and he said, well, I was in education. He was the Utah State Superintendent. He said, and in education, they are immediately placed on administrative leave.
Until they figure it out.
And I said, well, okay
Lang,
then.
the general authority, said this.
Yes. I said, okay then. And he said, but that's not how we do it in the church. We need the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses.
And I understand that. I get that there are false accusations. And the issue I have in the church is there's nobody's livelihood at stake here. You're more safe to believe the victim than the abuser. And in the meantime, till we get to the bottom of this, let's not leave him in the position that he's in.
Yeah, release the bishop.
Release the bishop.
Nobody dies.
Right.
It's respectful to the
Correct.
to the alleged victim.
Right.
And it allows time for the process
To unfold.
And even, all of his ward members, they don't even have to believe that this is true, but there's an accusation there.
They should be aware of that, So that was kind of our process of that is this, we believe the way that this is being handled is wrong. And we believe that the way that you're continually placing this burden back on us after now 5 months after we brought this up is ridiculous. And the last half of that meeting ended with them counseling us on our faith crisis again. My stake president, as much as I love him and as much as I care about him, really kind of chewed us out for not looking at things in a faithful way and don't leave the faith of your fathers. And, and I left that meeting with, if there's one point in my faith transition where I decided that the church was not just not true, but harmful, that was it. I left that night thinking, not only is this not true, but it's damaging and it's harmful, and I don't want anybody else to experience what we've experienced here. And so...
And I'm just going to jump in, and we have a listener, Pamela, who writes, I spoke with Lang. So she spoke with Lang, too, about abuse.
Better experience.
He told me he would look into my daughter's abuser. He never called me back.
Yep.
Exactly.
So we have a second, 2 or 3 witnesses.
Yeah,
we have 2 witnesses on how Elder Lang, who's now currently serving as a
Temple
Brigham
president,
City Temple
Brigham
president.
City
as the Temple president of Brigham City.
Right.
We have 2 instances where he has really bungled something very sensitive.
Yeah. He told us in that meeting that he had a few more questions for my uncle and that he was going to get in touch with him and that we would hear from him. We've never heard from Elder Lang since. He was released, and I get that he was in a transitional period, but we never heard anything from him after that meeting at all until my wife contacted my uncle's wife and we heard what they were told by Elder Lang. So it was reported, though. Natasha reported it, and we never heard anything from any law enforcement officials at all.
Probably because the statute of limitations
It was reported
in Idaho.
April. Yeah, so it was reported in April. And I had wondered, am I going to, his sheriff's office going to come? Anybody could call me? And I never heard a word. Well, there was a small brush fire up at around our house on August the 6th. So just over, 2 months ago. And farmers, we see a brush fire, so we run up there to try to help with this brush fire. We're helping with this brush fire. One of the sheriff's deputies, who was younger than me, but I knew growing up, comes over and says, I got a report from somewhere in the Midwest that has your name on it, and I don't really know what we should do with it. Do you know anything about that? And I knew exactly what it was. And I says, oh, yeah, I know what it is. You maybe why don't you stop by my house and I'll fill you in. So that day on August the 6th, the sheriff's deputy came by my house, and I told him the entire story. And so it has been reported, and The Franklin County Sheriff's Department does have my statement, and they're aware of it. Statute of limitations has long since run out, so there's nothing they can do, and I get that, but it has been reported. And there was more empathy and sympathy from that sheriff's deputy than there ever was for many of my priesthood leaders.
Yeah, yeah. Diamond writes, this poor guy, he keeps being understanding of them and nobody understands him. That's so painful. Robin writes, is not his sisters and mom a witness? He asked his sister to take off her pants, the bishop.
In my mind,
so
yes.
why isn't that 2 or 3 witnesses right there?
Yeah.
That's a good point. Thank you, Robin, for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have that experience with the sheriff's deputy. This is August 6th now, so, and that upsets me that they waited so long to contact me. We have a wedding that's coming up. I have a nephew that's getting married in the temple. We're obviously not going because we don't have temple recommends, but my parents are stressed to the max because they don't want to go to this temple wedding and see my uncle, who has, up to this point, not contacted them. So they had never talked to my uncle. They didn't want to meet him in the temple at his wedding sealing. So my parents weren't even going to go to my nephew's wedding, which bugged me. I'm like, this is exactly what I didn't want to happen, is to have this be a completely everybody tiptoeing around everybody in a complete mess. So my parents actually went to the wedding. My uncle and aunt did not show up to the wedding. They claimed that they didn't know about it, which was not correct, and that they had things that came up. So the wedding thing happens, and I'm like, okay, this is now August, and it's causing issues in our family, and I don't need to keep dealing with this. I was at a point now where I'm like, I was fine with this abuse for 35 years, but now I'm not, because I've spent the last 7 months with this being continually brought up, me being not believed, me being, looked at as unworthy. They've totally brought this. If the hardest 9 months in my life for me to deal with this abuse has been the last 9 months.
Because they say it re-traumatizes you, right?
It does.
Talk about that.
I don't know how to explain it other than some nights I can't sleep over this issue. The anger, the guilt, it just takes over your life again, and it shouldn't. I should have.
It should be a healing thing.
Correct, and it's not. It's we're now non-temple recommend holding, members, and it gets worse here because what happens is I decide this is it. I'm done. I'm going to give them one more chance to take care of this, and I'm not going to worry about this anymore. It's not. And Natasha helped us work through that. She's told us this isn't your problem. It's not your duty to protect people in his ward. It's not your duty to help him repent. None of that's your problem. That's their problem. Your problem is you, and to deal with you and for you to heal. And so I finally determined in August, this is it. We're going to fix this, and I'm not going to let them continue to make me the victim again here.
And the hardest part of the re-traumatization is not his uncle. It's not his uncle re-traumatizing him. It's the church. And the church was everything to us.
Exactly.
It was this organization that we based our entire life, our marriage, our parenting, our where we live, what we do, everything around. And now this church is doing this to us when we are just trying to bring this forward because this should not happen.
How much money in tithing do you think you paid?
Too much?
Tens of thousands, right?
Oh, I probably paid $250,000 in tithing.
And with all the service and all the commitment, and the fact that the church claims to be led by Christ and led by prophets.
And to have the gold standard of dealing with child abuse and sexual assault.
It claims to have the gold standard.
It claims to have the gold standard.
So I printed this out, which is the Mormon newsroom statement that they send all media to on how the church deals with abuse. I printed this out yesterday.
Show the camera.
So you can go to Mormon Newsroom. There's an infographic as well that comes with that, which looks like this. And for me to read through this...
What are some of the points that
it's laughable.
That make you angry?
Literally the only thing on here that the church has done that they say they do is there's windows in our church house Sunday school building.
But that's not church-wide. But what are the things that it claims it does that it didn't do?
The vigilant thing. What was that?
Okay, 24-hour helpline. Professionals are on the line to make certain the victim is cared for and ensure compliance with all reporting laws.
Not true?
Never happened.
Okay.
Natasha finally reported it.
Okay.
After she realized,
nothing to make sure that the victim is cared for.
Team creates a plan to move forward. I mean, the only plan that we ever had was they could put us on a tithing plan. Leaders are instructed on how to address victims and perpetrators. My leaders had no idea.
And they say they have no idea.
Elder Lang had no idea how to deal with this. Church works with authorities as they investigate and prosecute abuse.
They did say they were happy it was reported to CPS.
But they didn't ever take any responsibility to report it. As necessary, other congregational leaders are made aware so that they can be vigilant.
So what about
9 months,
Lord?
there's a bishop in Benson, Utah, who's been accused of these things, and for 9 months have people been made aware so that they can be vigilant.
He's still bishop.
Yes.
Currently bishop, yeah. Church supports investigation, counseling, and prosecution of the abuser. He's still a bishop. Abuser faces church discipline. He's still a bishop. And I read through this and it just is a mess, you know. Leader meets frequently with the victim to counsel and help healing. I mean, our healing has been, we don't, you know, believe, or, you know, our faith crisis has been our issue. So that, they say that publicly, they do not do that. There may be cases where they do that, but for the vast majority of the cases, they don't follow what they say they do. And that's a cultural issue. They've done that since the day that Joseph Smith stood in front of the people in Nauvoo and said he wasn't a polygamist, or the manifesto when they said they weren't practicing polygamy. They're not doing what they're saying they're doing publicly, and that's a problem. And it's a problem that gets shouldered back on the victims of abuse, whether it's sexual abuse, sexual assault, domestic abuse. The victims are the ones that are shouldering the problems. And when someone like us, we look to the church for help because we always thought that if we needed help, that's where we get it. And to turn to the church, doing what we feel has been right and getting no help has totally been a miserable experience. So the thing that made me the most mad, which has led me to be public about this, is after I realized that this was a mess in our family, my wife decided that she wanted to talk to my uncle's wife because we didn't know if she knew. We thought maybe he's just keeping this secret. So she did what I did with my uncle, texted her and says, I need to meet with you. And so she went down and met with my uncle's wife in her office where she works on, do you remember what day that was?
August.
This is a couple months ago.
Just like a month ago. A month and a half
so
ago.
So she can tell you how that went.
So I went down there and met with her. We chit-chatted kind of the same again. I couldn't tell. You know, she was very cordial. I honestly couldn't tell. We talked for a minute about what we'd been doing, and I said, do you know why I'm here? And she said, yes, I think I do. So I learned that Lynn thought Jared wanted to meet with him because I was mad at him over a family campground. He had texted me the year before. I knew about it. I knew about the abuse at the time. I didn't want to talk to him. I think I sent a very short text saying it was unavailable, flooded, wasn't going to work out, but check with my mother-in-law. He thought I was mad. So when Jared gets the text, hey, Jared wants to meet with me. I bet he's coming to tell me why Julie's mad. So he gets home from the meeting with Jared. Shelley says, why is Julie mad at you? Oh, no, Jared accused me of this.
So he told his wife that night.
So that was actually, it made me feel better. It really did. Because I had no idea if he would tell her. So that actually did alleviate some feelings. I said, honestly, one great concern I have is his reaction to the accusation. And she said, oh, that's just how he is. That's just how he acts.
Meaning never reaching out again.
Never reaching out again, not showing shock, not showing surprise.
Just robotic.
Why have you not reached out? Well, we were waiting for Jared's parents to reach out to us because we thought maybe they were mad at us. Yeah. I said, what about your kids? I have a great concern for your kids. They have 2 older children and they've adopted a child that has mild developmental issues. I was very concerned about her. She had history of abuse in an orphanage in another country. Mm-hmm. She assured me she'd never seen any signs of abuse with her children. She said she would go home and ask him for permission to ask their kids if she could ask them about that, which I thought, how about you just go ask them? Like, really? She told me flat out that she did not believe Jared's story because she and her husband have had multiple spiritual experiences together. If he had done this, there's no way the Spirit could be with him, and they never would have had those spiritual experiences, which is mind-blowing to me.
And the best part is that the stats in his ward are
Oh,
so
and this
phenomenally
couldn't
well.
be true because the stats in his ward are the best in the state. So if he wasn't meant to be bishop, how could the stats be good?
Yeah.
They'd both had spiritual experiences for him to be called to a bishop, and then 6 months later, guess what? He was called to be a bishop. I kind of logically tried to explain some of those things and said, 5 years, a lot of people start speculating that they could be called as a bishop. Could that be it? Oh, no. These were...
I would expect her to side with her husband, though. It wasn't a surprise to me that that's the way she went. And I don't invalidate their spiritual experiences.
But that logic shows egregious naivete.
Correct.
Yes.
Because
Correct.
George P. Lee, as a general authority, sexually abused people.
Right.
We have Joseph Bishop as MTC president who allegedly raped someone in the basement, and he's admitted to it, right? And we know that bishops and stake presidents have been adulterers and sexual abusers. Correct. Thousands, hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, have.
Yeah.
And they probably do have spiritual experiences. I'm not saying that they don't.
They have what they perceive to be spiritual experiences.
Exactly.
In fact, many of them are experts at manipulating people. That's the ability of abusive people, is they're experts at manipulating emotion and manipulating others. And that's what gives them the power and the ability to abuse people. So this whole associating these feelings that we've been taught are spiritual experiences with whatever meaning we attach to it, which is the church is true, this person must be good with God. Those are false equivalences, right?
Yeah.
So
and just because he's a good bishop and his stats are good and he's good to his wife and maybe good to his neighbors doesn't mean that he did horrible things to me 35 years ago.
Yeah, it's kind of like the trains ran on time in Nazi Germany, so what?
Yeah. And
what does that have to do with your abuse?
Right, nothing. Yeah. Like, he abused me as a child, and that's an issue. That doesn't mean that he can't have done other good things in his life.
Exactly.
And you can't use those good things to invalidate that he may have done bad things.
Yes.
But the biggest thing that sent me off the edge was she said that they were told by Elder Lang.
He was told. She was not there.
So Elder Lang told my uncle that he sensed discrepancies in my story and that he believed that we were using this as an excuse to leave the church and that Lynn would not be released as a bishop and that we would receive a letter telling us of that decision, which we did not ever see. And so I was livid. I mean, I was ready to, I'm like, are you...
What did you think? What did you, when you heard that?
I was so mad. And also that their stake president said that we refused to meet with him.
The one that blew me off for 3 weeks.
That we were blowing him off and that we refused to meet with him when that was an absolute lie. And our stake president can vouch that that is an outright lie because he tried to set up meetings for us as well. So I told her that that was not true. I said, we have nothing to gain through this. We have nothing to gain.
They're turning it as you're just trying to justify your sin.
If we need to leave the church, we will just leave the church quietly, peacefully. They've given us plenty of reasons.
Yeah. Well, and prior to this, I had done an interview over the phone with Larry Craig from KUTV News in relation to Sam Young's Protect the Children movement. I had shared my story with Sam Young anonymously because I thought that it was important that people realize maybe some of these bishops are bad bishops. And that reporter eventually, out of the blue, reached out to me. I didn't reach out to him. I got an email from him one day through Sam Young, and I debated whether or not to share my story with him, but I shared it without names. But there was enough information in there that people could connect the dots, and that's on KUTV News. You can see that. I let my stake president...
We'll include a link to that in our show notes.
after I had heard what Elder Lang had told my uncle, I immediately went home, went to my bishop and said, enough's enough. This is ridiculous. And if it's not going to be dealt with, I feel like I'm justified in dealing with this how I want to deal with this, not following your rules to deal with this anymore. I've done an article on KUTV News. I'm willing to speak up about this. If things aren't going to be handled correctly, then I don't want to be vocal, but I'm going to have to be. And I shared the same thing with my stake president. We met with him the next morning. He called us immediately. We met with him. I told him the same thing. He read the article. He sent the KUTV News article to my uncle's stake president. And my stake president assured me that he was going to talk with President Christensen now and run it back up the ladder again.
The new area authority.
The new area authority. And he would get back with us. So we met with him a week later. He said, I've talked to Elder Christensen. He's very concerned about this. He said he wanted to be kept very close. And my stake president and my uncle's stake president had met together to kind of figure out, again, for the fourth time, 9 months later, what are we going to do about this? And I thought that they were going to release him because of that.
And we went and met with Natasha that same time.
That same week was the week we went and met with Natasha. And I was pretty certain that my anger and my willingness to speak about this and saying this is wrong, they clearly knew that it wasn't about me or about my uncle. It was about he shouldn't be a bishop. Like, you guys can't have this policy to have him in there as a bishop. It's something that can't, it's an allegation. I get that. You don't have to believe me, but this is something where this man's not beyond reproach, and it's not going to ruin his life to be an elders quorum instructor. And we need to protect the kids that are there. And I don't think there's a single woman in that ward that has children that, even if they didn't believe me, would feel comfortable sending their kids into his office to talk about things that bishops talk about. I just don't. And that's not keeping members informed of to be vigilant. So I was pretty sure something was going to happen. We met with Natasha, shared our, visited with her, and I said, I'm pretty sure something will happen. Well, about a week and a half ago, I got a text from my stake president that said, unless we continue to push this issue, I could read the text, but summarizing it, he said, unfortunately, unless we continue to press this issue, it looks as if nothing is going to be done. Would you like to continue to press this issue? And I'll read the text just because I was just amazed that here we are 9 months, the fourth time that nothing's being done here still. And
so CPS knows, law enforcement knows, church lawyers, inside counsel, outside counsel, 2 general authorities.
Yeah.
4 times this has been brought up.
9 months of mental burdens we shouldn't have to deal with. And this is the text I get a couple weeks ago. It says, just wanted to say, I think we have ran as far as we are going to go unless you feel you would like to personally meet with President Ballard or Elder Christensen. I have a sense it is an issue that will not be discussed again unless we bring it up. I'm willing to do whatever you feel is best for you to do. I have no expectations other than you will do it as best for you and your family. I'm here for whatever it may be. So he places the burden on me again.
Your stake president.
My stake president.
Okay.
Basically says,
supportive either way.
He's going to be a bishop. He's not going to be released. If you want to continue to push it, I'll do it. If not, whatever. And I'm done working in their system.
So you don't want to go to Christensen and meet with him?
I said, I don't need to visit with them. It's not going to do any good for me or my wife, and I don't think it will do any good for anyone else at this point. And then I sent him this. I said, I do want to say I think it is a huge mistake for them to go this route, but that's not my problem. They can deal with whatever consequences follow for their decisions. I know that my wife and I have done nothing without a lot of thought and prayer. We are at peace knowing we have done what is right and are fine with whatever consequences follow our decisions. I really feel that my Savior would be with me on this issue and not the direction the church is going. And I left it at that. And that gave me the excuse to say I've done everything that the church would want me to do to handle this the way they would want it handled. And they have failed every time. And so I'm willing to speak about this because it's an issue that needs to be fixed, and silencing the victims in these cases is not the solution to the problem. And that's what they're doing. And it needs to stop. So if they're not going to handle it, then I'm willing to share. I know that I can't do anything myself, but the hundreds or thousands of us that are in the same situation, the stories that you hear over and over again, that are the same need to be heard, and people need to speak up, and the church needs to realize that they are doing things wrong.
So at a minimum, it seems like the ward members and stake members in your uncle's ward and stake need to be made aware that very credible allegations of super egregious child sexual abuse have been made against their sitting bishop. And they all need to know that that's who's leading that ward, and interviewing children and interviewing youth and sitting alone with these youth and young women and young men and adult women and adult men. They all should be made aware, because that is in and of itself a significant threat to their health and safety. Am I wrong?
I think you're exactly right. And that's what the Mormon newsroom advice says that they do, which they clearly don't. I mean, I don't think anybody would feel comfortable with anybody who's been accused of those things being a bishop. They're clearly not beyond reproach, and your chances of,
if you even take us out of the situation, if you just look at statistics of abuse reports, they're 98% credible. So the church is taking a 2% gamble, and that we're using this to leave the church.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a gamble they want to take.
Because legally, if the church takes action, I'm sure they're concerned that they're acknowledging or admitting that the abuse happened, and then they risk not only liability, but their own reputation, their own credibility, potential lawsuits, and just the admission that someone was called to a position that should have never been called, and that damages the reputation of the church in their mind.
Yeah.
And so they're taking the legalistic, lawyerly, cover your bases, protect yourself approach.
And that's why they don't. That's why they don't discipline people that are accused, like Joseph Bishop or my uncle, because as soon as they do, they admit guilt. And that to me is ridiculous, that we're letting attorneys run this show when people's lives are being railroaded, and they're just leaving a mess of carnage in people's lives, which they don't care about. They care more about their risk and their image and their liability, and that's wrong.
And what's then just an extra order of magnitude crazy or egregious is that the whistleblowers, the people like the Kate Kellys, the Sam Youngs, the Jeremy Runnels, who call to the church's attention in a very public way so that they even have a chance at making the positive change. Mm-hmm. They shoot the messenger. They execute the messenger, the person that actually is the one that leads to them making the positive change. So they're shooting and killing, assassinating the whistleblowers.
Correct. Well, and in our community, we're the ones that have left the church because of doubts. We're the doubting. People in our neighbors don't know why we're not at church, but they should. But they're being told that, they're non-temple recommend holding doubters, and don't listen to what they have to say. And that's the way they discredit you and keep their power there, and it's tough for us to deal with. But
I mean, I told them that they had to release me finally in March. I couldn't do it anymore. And so we went 1 week. I was the primary president. We didn't go back the next week. They released me, and we haven't been since.
Yeah. So I think that's basically the story. And where it sits today is my uncle is still a bishop. And, it's obvious to me that the general authorities believe him and not me, otherwise he would be released as a bishop. That's the message that I get from them, is that there's,
Or the lawyers are telling them they can't take action because it admits guilt.
Yeah. Their legal risk in my case is 0 because the statute of limitations are expired. So a Curtin and McConkie attorney would be saying we have no risk. The only risk they have is me being vocal and public about this, which they, you go back 2 weeks ago and all my, the only thing I've done is shared a story without names on KUTV News. So I've not been very vocal about this at all. but, I'm not afraid to do so now.
One of our listeners, Lori, she writes, "You can just see this guy's anger. I'm so sorry this happened to you. My husband wants me to take my issue to the church and to the church school, but I honestly don't think I could go through what you are going through. This is grueling." And that's a really important point that Lori's making, which is how many of these instances of abuse go unreported.
Right.
And then when you see the way that this is handled and what it puts people through, it's this huge disincentive to suppress anyone else. They're just going to say, why bother? Why go through this? It's just punishing. And so that's all the more a credit and a kudo. It's just so amazing that you guys are willing to go through this. Because what's your upside? You're not getting a financial settlement. You have a successful financial position.
We've been accused that we're doing it for notoriety.
So you want fame.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
To be known as the victim of sexual abuse is so.
Yeah.
It has so many rewards to it.
Yeah, lots. I'm just basking all the rewards. Like it's been miserable for us, and I would hope that people that have similar stories would have the courage to, number one, report it to law enforcement first. They're not going to get much help reporting it to their bishops. Report it to law enforcement and find somebody that is a counselor that can give you the help and the guidance that you need. Lori, the person there, I mean, there's nothing that is more healing than to speak about that to somebody that understands you. And that's not going to be a bishop or a stake president in most cases. That's going to be a counselor. But law enforcement needs to know these things. They need to be reported to law enforcement first and let them deal with those issues. And then you need to find somebody that can listen to you and help you. Staying silent is not going to solve that. It's just going to be a burden you're going to continue to carry your entire life. But there are people that you can talk to that will help, and it does help. You just have to make sure that you talk to the right people, and that's the hard part is active members of the church think the right people are your bishop. But they're not. And when you realize that, that can be devastating.
So what counsel do you give people? So you're saying speak up if you're in a position to do so.
Yeah.
Get help. Sounds like Natasha Helfer Parker is someone you can recommend.
Amazing.
You can contact Natasha at natashaparker.org.
Yeah.
She's great.
Yes.
You can go to the Mormon Mental Health Association website, and there's a list of providers there.
Yeah.
Who many of them are going to be skilled with dealing with trauma victims and
Natasha actually, when we spoke with her, she kind of walked us through of, do we need counseling? Do we not? What could it do? What are the benefits? How do you receive counseling? All those kinds of things, and it was very beneficial.
Any other suggestions you can make to victims or their family?
It was very hard for Jared to speak up, and it was hard for me because with this faith transition, it was hard to share because this was such a pivotal part of it. I didn't feel like I could share his story, and it was very hard for him to share. But I think once he started to share it, it has been, I don't want to speak for you.
It helps. It helps to share the story that you have with the people that you trust. You have to be careful sharing it with those that you do trust. But it definitely helps. And if you're in a position where you feel you can do that, it's going to be beneficial for you. It's not going to be beneficial to stay silent.
So for you, this has been grueling, this has been frustrating, angering. Mm-hmm. Has it been healing? And if so, how?
It has, other than the anger towards the church. And that's where we're at now.
How has it been healing?
I'm willing to talk with my wife about that. And we understand each other a lot better than we did before. I know that she's got my back. And I've got hers. And our relationship with our kids, the big fear that everybody's tried to bring into our life is, what about your kids? What are your kids are all going to turn out to be, trouble children. But the relationship we have with our kids is better than it's ever been. And our family is way more open than we've ever been. We can talk about things. They know they can come to us with anything. Mm-hmm. And it's a no judgment zone there that we respect their views. And so as a family, we're in a much better position. I feel we're in a much healthier position, a much happier position. When it comes to, our relationship with our parents Julie's parents have been phenomenal. My parents have been great, although the faith issue there, they're still very active believing members, and that relationship is different. So the church relationship, the community that we've lost there is hard and will probably continue to be hard. I don't ever see that changing much. But we're better for speaking up. Although there are days when the anger level really rises, and you don't know whether it's something that you should suppress and just not use, but I think sometimes anger is an emotion that needs to be used.
Anger is something you learn from and lean into and process, not suppress and avoid.
Correct.
And not hang in there forever.
Yeah.
I mean, it's getting better.
And, stuff that happens, and it seems to happen regularly now, the Kavanaugh hearings, I understand those scenarios so much better now, and the anger from seeing how people that don't understand those situations deal with that. If you can use that anger to try to promote awareness and stuff that will improve people's lives, it needs to be done instead of tearing people down.
So your mental health is improved, your marriage is improved, your relationship with your children is improved. I imagine you feel like your kids are safer from not being
Absolutely.
Yes.
raised in an institution that handles abuse in this way.
Correct. And that's why initially we figured we would be nuanced and continue to go so our kids would have a place with their friends in the community, because it's almost all LDS. But I no longer feel comfortable with them there, because I don't want them to be, they go to college and get married and move on. I don't know if the bishop that they're going to have is going to be a bishop that can't be trusted. So, and we're very open with our kids, and they're the generation that they make their own decisions. So my 14-year-old did not get ordained to be a teacher, and my 12-year-old did not get ordained to be a deacon, and that was their choice that they made. They were given the choice and told that we would support them, and they decided not to. And my 17-year-old daughter did not enroll in Release Time Seminary this year. So they're making their own decisions, and they're doing very well, and they're very happy. And I think that's a happier, healthier way to raise kids than to force them into something that, in my opinion, and I know it's my opinion, is not truth, and is not something that's going to bring them happiness.
The community aspect of it is hard, but...
Why? What's hard about it?
Because everybody's Mormon. There's rumors about, because my daughter didn't sign up for seminary, that she's an atheist, which she's not at all.
As if that's a horrible thing.
She's a great girl who probably doesn't believe that much different from a lot of the kids in seminary. But, and our 14-year-old had to stand up to the kid in the ward that said, "Are you not getting ordained?" "Nope, I'm not." Just things kids have enough to deal with. They shouldn't have to deal with this as well. They should just be able to be who they are and be confident in that. And so we'll see.
Anything else you want to say, Julie, about how things are now? What you've learned from all this?
It's hard when your entire faith crumbles because you don't trust anything anymore, which is a hard place to be, but it's a freeing place to be at the same time. We're in the process of figuring out where we belong, where we believe, what we don't believe, and that's a scary thing, but at the same time it can be very freeing and very, like I said, open with our kids and not judgmental and not being told what to believe. So it's scary, but it's good.
Really quickly, what if someone were to say, well, okay, you just got offended. You left the church because you were offended, right? That's a common trope or a common stereotype. Mm-hmm. Can you just quickly talk about other things you've learned or other major factors? You don't have to go into detail, but list the other factors that have contributed to your decision to not continue believing or your loss of faith. Do either of you want to? Just
the faith transition issues?
Yeah. Well,
so the big things for me...
because this happened and people are going to say, well, that's why you left. Because
right. Well, I think
you were offended because of the way the church handled it. Is that why you left?
No, that's part of the puzzle. I mean, I think everybody that goes through a faith transition has some event in their life that moves them to question, whether that's a you've heard this. Everybody has something in their life that moves them. The thing that moved me to question my faith was my uncle being called as a bishop, and he abused me as a child. That allowed me to say, let me look at this. And as I started to look at those things, some of the things that I didn't know, the Book of Abraham issues were big initially. But I kind of looked at things and said, what does Mormonism have that's different from Christianity? And the three pivotal things for me were the temple, the priesthood keys, and the Book of Mormon. And so I spent a lot of time looking into the origin of the temple endowment ceremony and where all of our temple stuff comes from. And I looked
And you found what?
Well, I found that, obviously the sealing ceremony and the endowment ceremony originated within the Quorum of the Anointed, which was the quorum that secretly kept polygamy a secret in Nauvoo. And that's where that came from. That's the only people that received those sealings and endowments were the polygamists. Her uncle, or her ancestor, John Pack, was one of those that was in that quorum. And he was only allowed in that quorum because he agreed with the principle of polygamy, so they let him in. Those are the only people that wore garments. And so when you look at that, everything,
That's a problem for you. Why?
Because that's not what we're told that, the temple endowment ceremony is something that has been ancient in origin and handed down through time, and that it's not tied to polygamy, but it clearly originated with polygamy, and it clearly originated with Masonic issues, and it's not what we're taught today. And so
for you, the fact that it originated with the Masonic Lodge, not, some ancient
Temple of Solomon.
Yeah, which is only a few hundred years old,
Correct.
Actually. And then
Correct.
the fact that it's tainted by having originally been used as a way to create these blood oaths. Correct. So that polygamy could be kept from people,
Correct.
hidden,
Yes. Right.
and practiced in a private and yet
Right.
very abusive way.
Right.
For you, that taints the temple ritual.
Correct.
Okay.
That to me allows me to say those things that are done in there are not essential for my salvation. And the restoration of the priesthood, you get into did Peter, James, and John the Baptist really come and restore keys to Joseph and Oliver? I don't believe so. I believe that's highly questionable with the way that unfolded. So I don't believe that was the case.
What a lot of people don't know that Joseph never talked about the Melchizedek
Correct.
priesthood until
Correct.
1838.
Right.
That none of the early church leaders ever heard any mention of the Melchizedek priesthood.
Right.
There's no date.
Right.
There's no
Till Joseph
written
needed
record.
one up on him.
Right.
And then in 1838, when the church is falling apart, people are questioning the authority.
Right.
He writes back into the narrative
Correct.
that there was a
Right.
Melchizedek priesthood. And
Right.
even today, we don't celebrate the restoration of the Melchizedek priesthood because there's no
not-
date.
No.
Right.
Because we don't know when it happened
Yeah.
because it never
Right.
happened because it was written back into the
The
narrative.
Book of Commandments versus the Doctrine and Covenants, what was added in.
So
Yeah.
so that fell apart for
Even
me.
David Whitmer was like, what was Joseph talking about? I have
Right.
no idea what he means by
Exactly.
And he was one of the three
Yeah, he
witnesses
left
of the Book of
because of it,
Mormon.
yeah.
and-
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, so the whole Melchizedek priesthood is bankrupt.
Right. That
Yeah.
falls apart. So that's not that important. And then the historicity of the Book of Mormon and the anachronisms and the DNA evidence. I firmly believe that it's a modern day document. I don't believe that it's ancient. I don't believe that he translated it. So if those things fall apart, what's left for me to give all that I can to that organization? And I believed initially that I could still support and be a member and gain the benefits from the organization. But when I realized that it's not a safe
It's a
place,
dangerous organization.
and that the things that they're doing to protect abusers, I can find a lot of other places that are safer places.
People like to say, I think I've heard Bill Reel say this, but I don't think he was the first to say it, that I don't need the church to be true, I just need it to be good.
Absolutely.
And what you're saying is
Correct.
what?
And I get that sexual abuse happens in every organization. It happens in every church. It happens in every business. It happens in every government. It happens everywhere. And it's not that it happens in the church. It's that it's not dealt with. The measure of a good organization is how they deal with that. There are plenty, if you want to be a member of a church, there are plenty of churches that deal with sexual abuse in a very good way. And unfortunately, I don't believe that the LDS Church is one of those. And so that's why we've decided that that's not where we're going to be for now. And I don't know where we end up. We like going to evangelical churches. It's not that if I were to, I don't know what I believe at this point. very comfortable saying that I'm an agnostic, maybe an atheist, but I don't know. I would hope there's something, but I don't know. I find value in good Christian-based teachings, even though I don't know that Jesus really was resurrected. But I find value in those. But I have a hard time tying myself to another organization and pledging allegiance to another organization.
Tammy writes, the church should be better than the rest of the world if Jesus is leading it.
For sure.
That's a good point, Tammy.
Yeah.
Julie, anything else you want to add about your loss of faith that isn't just reducible to you were offended?
I think, like what you said about Bill Reel, it actually reminded me in a recent podcast he did where they were talking about the face-to-face with Elder Cook. He said a statement that summed up basically how I felt, and it was kind of what you said. And I had to listen to it 10 times and write it down. But he said, I went from going, the church may not be true, but it still has the ability to be good, to going to not only is the church probably not true, but that it causes deep trauma and hurt intentionally to others if that damage will protect its authority in any way, shape, or form. And once I came to grips with the fact that the church will do anything, including damaging and traumatizing its own members, if that protects its authority, then I no longer had a need or a want or a desire to walk people back into belief in the nonsensical.
That's Bill Reel?
Yes.
Yeah, and that Elder Quentin Cook, Nauvoo, a little fireside that they had deserves its own series on Mormon stories because
I actually had a proud parenting moment because our 17-year-old came and said to me, "Can you believe they said this?" She was shocked in that they would claim the things that they said in that.
Because it was massive whitewashing and deception and gaslighting. The way that they're talking about polygamy and the Book of Mormon, the Book of Abraham, church authority, the neo-apologists and the faithful church historians are gaslighting and deceiving people now systematically, and it's deeply troubling. And we have to do a series on that as well.
And I think Jared's more logical, and I agree with everything he logically says. I feel sometimes I'm a little bit more emotional, but I feel deeply betrayed. And then when the church tells me it's my fault because I just misunderstand translation, or I misunderstand what Joseph actually meant when he said restored or revelation, and puts it back on me, we were even told by Elder Lang that we just misinterpreted what we understood revelation was.
Kimberly Anderson, one of our loyal listeners, hey Kimberly, she asks if LGBTQ plus issues factor into your disaffection at all.
They
Yes.
do. That's always kind of been a shelf issue for me, and that I tried to explain it away. Well, that's just a temptation God would give, because I've always known that people would not choose that. But
we both have friends from our childhood that are LGBTQ.
Yeah, and the treatment of that and the policy, that was a huge issue for us before. We just added it to the shelf till the shelf crumbled.
And that's an issue for me participating in other evangelical organizations, as a lot of them are not accepting at all of that. And so I have a hard time, there's some evangelical churches that I really enjoy, other than the fact that they're not going to accept LGBTQ people for who they are. So that's not a major issue for us, but it's something that I've always believed the way that the church has handled that is wrong. The November 15th policy was troubling to us, but we were going through a lot of other things at that time, at least I was. But yeah, the way that the way that LGBTQ people are treated is wrong.
Yeah.
And we always forget women. What about the way women are treated, not able to hold leadership positions, not able to hold the priesthood? Let's let Julie answer that first.
Well, let me answer one thing first, and then let Julie answer, because she, for most of these interviews that we've had with bishops and stake presidents and Elder Lang, the focus has been me. Like, they have looked at me, they've talked to me, they've asked me, and it's been about the priesthood holder, the male. And very rarely, she was usually sitting over here kind of as a side guest. Like, there was not a lot of concern for her, and that was troubling to me. She brought that up a couple times, and it was very obvious that their concern for her, both of us sitting there having the same issues, that they were not concerned about her. And I saw that come out in that process, and it was troubling to me.
Julie, what are you feeling and thinking?
It's actually kind of funny because I listened to one of your podcasts. I can't remember their names, the mother-daughter combination that you did a couple weeks ago.
Katie and her mom,
yes,
Jill. Katie and Jill.
And Jill was talking about how our stake president came on our porch and said, well, we don't need to hold a court. I listen as I mow my lawn. And I literally yelled, are you kidding me?
She was in a same-sex marriage.
Yes.
And the bishop's like,
and you're a woman, so you actually don't need to be held at a court. You can just be excommunicated. And I was like, ah.
That made you feel what?
Just outraged that really, like, women basically not run the church, but it kind of would fall apart without women in the Relief Society and everything that they do. Polygamy is a big issue for me. Reading my ancestors' journals and their testimonies of John Pack's wife flat out says polygamy was the worst and hardest thing of her life, and it nearly killed her. But she's glad she did it because she'll be rewarded in heaven. And that just makes me sick to my stomach. Listening to the polygamy stories of the way that women were treated, and it's not fair, it's wrong. I never really considered myself a feminist till I realized what a feminist was. And then
what is it to you?
Just that you stand up and believe that women should be treated the same as men, and that is definitely true. So, yes, I have issue with that.
Wow. Well, this is powerful stuff. And if I were to read all the people thanking you and telling you how courageous you both are, it would take another hour. But I want to give you guys a chance to each kind of give some closing thoughts, share whatever I didn't ask that you wish I'd asked, or whatever you want to say that we didn't cover, or any final words for abuse victims, for family of abuse victims, for church leaders. I want to give you guys each a chance to kind of give a final statement. It almost sounds legalistic. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I guess the saddest thing to me in the faith transition stories that I hear is when the wife chooses the church or the husband chooses the church. And I get that, but at the same time,
when the believer chooses the church over their
non-believing spouse. Yeah. That breaks my heart. I mean, even what kind of a church is it that teaches families that would tell you to destroy your family? So I would just say, give them the benefit of the doubt. Jared and I, we were on a similar path. He got there a little quicker than I did. But just have patience with each other and work through it and talk to each other. And if there's a sexual abuse, just talk about it. The more you talk about it, the better it gets. It's hard and it's scary. And our life isn't perfect now. We're probably going to get some backlash for this in the community as well as, but we feel like it's the right thing to do. And we feel like the church isn't going to do it. So unfortunately, the burden's been placed on us again. So just believe your truth. You don't have to believe what they tell you to believe. You know in your mind what's true and in your heart. And I'm not just being logical and non-emotional. And people say, you've got to trust the Spirit and ignore your mind. And we've been told that the devil has checked his box and that we're just as evil as can be. And I don't feel evil. I feel good. I feel happy. I feel free. I feel happier without the community backlash. If we could live outside of Mormondom, this would be, and that's what I've told Jared. I am so sorry that he had to go through the things he did. But I am so glad that he finally told me and that we were able to open our eyes and see what this organization for what it is. Because I don't want my kids to have to figure this out on their own. If I can protect them, and even if they choose it, I want them to do so with eyes wide open. That they know what they're getting into, that they're choosing the truth, not this whitewashed version that we've been sold our entire lives. So I'm not sorry it happened because of that.
Jared?
My primary purpose of being here is that I think that there's a problem within institutions and how they deal with sexual assault, sexual abuse, and domestic abuse. And silence is not the answer to that. This story's not, it's not a story about me, it's not a story about my uncle. It's a story about abuse. And people need to speak up about abuse. And institutions need to deal with that abuse differently than they have been dealing with it. And if anybody, people who really know me, like if I can be here speaking up about this, anybody can. Like I am not a public person. Like for me to speak up about these things is difficult. And if I can do it, anybody can do it. And that's the solution to this problem. Is the solution is not silence. The solution is not atonement and forgiveness. The solution is people need to be aware that these things happen, and that institutions need to be held accountable for the way that they deal with those things. And there's right ways to deal with these things that can make it better for everybody involved. And that's what I want people to know, is that we need to speak up. Silence is not the answer to this. And if there's enough people that speak up about these things, maybe a difference can be made, because there's just carnage that's being left behind in people's lives, whether that's abuse or LGBTQ people's lives. I mean, the amount of damage that's...
Or just kids who masturbate or have normal sexual exploration.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, it's just amazing that this is the way things are dealt with, when if you would deal with them correctly, people aren't going to look at you and say, wow, you're dealing with that good. I'm not going to be a part of that. Like, doing the right thing is the right way to go. So that's what I would say, is people need to speak out about this. It does help. Find people that you can trust. Don't internalize it. Don't bury it deeper. Go to someone that can give you help, and it can make a difference. That's what I would hope would come of this. From my vulnerability and speaking out, if it can make a difference and help make a difference, then it's been worth it.
So the call to action for those of you who are listening, if you're suffering with a history of abuse and you haven't spoken to anyone, find a trusted loved one to speak with. Find a therapist like Natasha Parker, natashaparker.org. Go to Mormon Mental Health Association. Find a good therapist to talk to. Report to police when it's appropriate. Be really careful about talking to church leaders about it. Use caution there, but speak out, get help. And then for all of you who want to do more, share this podcast on your wall, share it on Instagram, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, email it to friends and family, share this story and other stories like it everywhere you can. We had, at least 54 shares. I don't know, I know we've had hundreds and hundreds of people tune in. Now we're up to 55 shares. I hope that those of you who are listening will consider sharing this story and other stories publicly. That will make a difference. We need to get to not only the members of the ward of this bishop, but members of the stake, family members. And it's not just this bishop in Mink Creek. It's bishops and stake presidents everywhere. So we need to build broad awareness about how people think that leaders are inspired. People think that their children and young adults are safe. They're not. The church is not a safe place for its youth, for its children, for its adults, young adults. So we need to speak up. As the scriptures say, everyone who has been warned needs to warn their neighbor. You've all been warned. Warn your loved ones, warn your neighbors. Speak up, in or out of the church. And that's the way people get protected. And then here on Mormon Stories, we will do at least a few more stories of how the church protects abusers at the expense of the abused. So if you want to message us, email us at mormonstories@gmail.com. Tell us your story. We can't tell all the stories, but we'll tell a few. And that can be your way as well. You can write about it. You can blog about it. You can Facebook about it. but we just all need to speak out until changes happen. And there should be outrage. This story alone should generate outrage to the point where this bishop gets suspended or is released, not because he's guilty, but because multiple credible allegations have been made where it's clear that this person never, where the church has been put on notice that they have a potential serious problem. Nothing's been done. And I would call on listeners to do all they can to make it so the church makes the right decision here by any means necessary that's legal and ethical and kind and compassionate. Because this man shouldn't remain as bishop until this gets resolved. And this isn't the only case. There are hundreds and thousands of issues like it. So if you want to come on Mormon Stories and tell your story, mormonstories@gmail.com, we'd love it. Any other things I'm forgetting?
It's not the bishop in Mink Creek. He's a good guy.
Right. This is the bishop where?
It's Benson, Utah.
In Benson, Utah. Yeah, you can figure out who this is if you care and if you want to.
Doesn't take a lot of footwork to figure that out.
But it's a stake president in Benson, and it's a stake president. It's stake presidents in southern Idaho that are mishandling a really important situation. There's a temple president that's complicit in this, in the Brigham City Temple, and there's an area authority president general authority, who is not handling this right.
He's busy fighting Prop 2 right now.
He's fighting Prop 2, trying to keep
Stop
the
marijuana.
citizens of Utah from voting for marijuana. So priorities, Mormon Church.
Exactly.
Sam Young and medical marijuana need to be defeated, but we'll leave legitimately accused sexual abusers in office and excommunicate Sam Young and fight Prop 2. So we need to speak up, and you guys are heroes for telling this story. And on behalf of my listeners, Jared and Julie, we cannot thank you enough for your courage and your honesty and your openness and your sacrifices. We love you.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you.
And there's listeners that write, we live near you and we want to reach out. So go back to the comments, and there's some people saying, you're not alone.
Yeah.
We'll be your community. And that's true. We will be your community.
Thank you. And you are amazing. I can't imagine going through what you went through with nothing and no one and the internet and Mormon Stories. And we didn't really include that in our story, but it was a huge, I've probably we've probably both listened to almost all of your stories. So it's a huge, and that's why we're doing this, is because we know what a difference the stories can make. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And a huge shout out, as you mentioned a huge shout out to our board of directors at the Open Stories Foundation, to Cody Layton, who produces these podcast episodes, and to all the donors and supporters who make Mormon Stories, the Open Stories Foundation possible. We couldn't do it without you. So a huge thank you to anyone who supports us. And if you want to support us, mormonstories.org, you can donate there. Your donations make a huge difference and keep this alive. So please support us if you can. But thank you guys so much. We love you. Please stay in touch, and bless you. And we wish you happy, fulfilling, meaningful, thriving lives in your future.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care, guys.
Okay, thank you.
Take care, everybody. Talk to you again soon on Mormon Stories. Take care.